But Adam, let's listen. Let's go ahead and kick things off here with something that we knew was going to be a thing. I guess the question now is just how big of a thing it is going to be. As everybody knows, we are in the final week of NFL preseason. There is an off week, and then we are getting into the NFL season for the next 18 weeks for the regular season, of course, playoffs and Super Bowl to follow. So with that, we know the acquisition period is basically football, right? We know that is where they are going to get the majority of their new customers. It is the easiest time to reach people because even the most casual sports fan is still watching NFL games. They're watching Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football, and sitting in front of the TV on Sunday. So what kind of ads are we going to see as we head into the biggest time of the year for these sports books?
I think the question that we're dealing with this week is how are state-level regulators going to look at this advertising? And that's why we're talking about it here right now, beyond the fact that it's the beginning of NFL season, because this week a group of gaming regulators from across North America got together, and one of the main topics of discussion was how are we going to deal with sports betting advertising? Now, let's set a little bit of backdrop here. According to iSpot, last year, sports betting commercials totaled up to $315 million of spend. A lot of companies that are involved in this space have said that they're going to reduce their marketing budgets this year. We'll see if the deluge looks quite the same as it has been in the past. Now, we don't believe that it's going away by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a question of how much will there be. And for some of the regulators, the question is, are we getting it too soon? The folks in Maine are concerned that they're already seeing a lot of ads that are kind of leaking over state borders. The folks in Connecticut responded by saying, yeah, you know what? We saw the exact same thing before we went live. Folks in Kansas came in and said, yeah, if you give these folks an inch, talking about the sports books and their advertisements, they'll take a mile. Now, the folks in Connecticut came back and said, well, you know what? You have to push back on them, and when we've pushed back on them, they've responded with better disclaimers and clearer information and so on. And I think the point that I wanted to make in talking about this is it shouldn't be a situation where regulators are worried about these companies taking a mile when they're given an inch, but there is good faith in the idea that when the regulators do what they're there to do, which is say, hey, no, stop, this is too much, or hey, you need to tweak this, or hey, you can't do that, that the sportsbooks generally have been responsive. We as an industry, I think, would love to see a little more proactive approach as opposed to a reactive approach. But I think it's important that we have this discussion about how regulators are looking at advertising, because obviously we've seen efforts from the federal level to regulate sports betting ads. We saw a bill dropped earlier this year in Congress to potentially limit severely the amount of advertising that could be on FCC-approved channels. So getting ahead of the conversation continues to be where I think this industry needs to be. And right now is when the conversation is about to ramp up again. We're going to hear all of the complaining. We're going to see the think pieces about, oh my goodness, advertising with sports betting. The more the conversation can be had between regulators and sports books ahead of time and not be reactive to these things, the better it is for everybody overall.
So Dustin, when we take a look at this, we have had a couple of the major operators out there say they were at least going to pull back a little bit on their ad spending, so we'll see what that looks like as we head into the fall. We kind of hadn't heard much from DraftKings and FanDuel as to what their strategy is going to be. We know that Bet365, we think, is kind of starting to get into the fold a little bit more. Will we start to see a bunch more of their ads in the states that they're legal in? Fanatics is coming into the markets that they're in. Will we start to see Fanatics commercials as well? And I think we hinted at this a little bit last year, and it's kind of like, it feels like it's a lot, but there's just a lot of different sports books, right? So it's like if it's one ad from all of them, it feels like, oh my God, we're getting crazy. But it's not like get the DFS days of the past where it was only DraftKings and FanDuel and literally every other commercial was DraftKings and FanDuel like going on. It's just there's a lot of sports books, and so even if they're only running one ad every 90 minutes, it still feels like you're getting just a ridiculous amount of ads.
Yeah, and I think we've been saying, I feel like there's this pullback on marketing, but is this the time to stop marketing? This is the time to do your marketing, right? If you're keeping your powder dry for week 1 of the NFL and just around that, right? So like maybe we'll see less ads, but yeah, I mean, if I'm DraftKings and FanDuel, this is when I'm still trying to acquire users and create brand awareness, get them betting on my app, right? So maybe MGM and Caesars are a little less. Does Fanatics come in there? Who knows? Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see. But yeah, we're not going to see this drop to 0 either. That's. I mean, it's going to be. It might be less. It might be still a lot. But I think you're right. There's still there's just going to be always a lot of ads just because there are lots of sports books. I think the other thing I want to point out, and this is less of a TV ad regulatory thing than just in general, but there's a lot of hand wringing about advertising with sports books. And, I'm going to get up on my soapbox again. And, who doesn't have to deal with all that nonsense? Daily fantasy sports sites offering prop parlays. They get none of this smoke. This is what makes me angry whenever we come and talk about regulation. Adam wants me to stop yakking.
No, I don't want you to stop yakking. I'm actually impressed at the pivot.
I know.
I'm super impressed at where you took that. That was deft. I'm proud of you.
I'm good. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk about this in every chance I get. But yeah, when you talk about this, we're getting a lot of smoke for regulated sports betting. When offshore isn't doing TV, but they're doing plenty of other advertising. You see the underdogs and the Prize Picks doing lots. Does Prize Picks start doing TV advertising? They have a lot of money and want to get a lot of users. I wouldn't be shocked to see a Prize Picks commercial. And who's not getting smoke from regulators? Or they have some DFS laws, but most of the places they're not regulated as a sports book. So again, not a TV issue as much as just a hand-wringing about advertising. These guys kind of get left off on the side, and I think it's not fair.
Adam, I'm going to take this on a tangent here, but I think it's related to kind of what we're talking about as well. What we did see last year was when there was integration of any sports betting stuff into the traditional kind of more like the pregame shows and postgame. There wasn't a ton of it in game, but it did seem a little forced because they were asking guys that were not very familiar with the industry and certainly the terminology and what goes on with gambling to kind of work it in. And I do wonder what that will look like a year later, right? And we actually talked about this offline, the three of us, but I guess it's worth bringing up. And you did point out that it had already been decided before the deal went through, but who knows? Maybe who knows how long this deal was actually took to get going. But Scott Van Pelt is going to be doing Monday Night Countdown for ESPN. As we know, ESPN bet to come in November. Scott Van Pelt, very familiar with the gambling side of things. And so that discussion on ESPN should be much easier than I think we've seen on some of the other networks who have really tried to get it in there, but then it's just kind of like, I don't know, man, square peg, round hole.
Really, when we talk about sports betting messengers in the mainstream media, there are very few that are credible. And Scott Van Pelt is one of them. Scott Van Pelt is a respected voice, not only in sports media in general, but I think both people who are new to sports betting and who are familiar with sports betting both can relate to the kind of content that he puts out there. If you listen to his podcast with Stanford Steve, it's the same sort of thing. You can understand the way they're relating it to people, and I think that will help ESPN Bet when it does launch. But let's also look at the fact that one of the two major networks that carries NFL football during the middle of the day Sunday just shut down its sportsbook. And I think that's going to change the impressions that some people have as well. Like maybe too many people won Terry's money and we can no longer have Fox Bet. I don't know. But that's one of the integrations that is going to be gone. And you're not going to have Fox Bet being pushed because there's no Fox Bet anymore. Over on the other side with CBS, their gambling content has never been out front. They're probably the most reticent of all of the networks to put their gambling content out in front of people. Now, it'll be a little bit more prominent on Sunday Night Football with the deal they have with MGM. You no longer have to worry about PointsBet and will Drew Brees be killed live on air by a lightning strike. What we have, I think, overall is a shifting landscape of how these ads are going to look and how the integrations, as you mentioned, Matt, are going to look. And I think we speak for everyone who's even a little bit involved in this space when we say easy on the integrations. I think everybody can learn to deal with the advertising and the fact that, okay, maybe it becomes as ubiquitous as the beer ads and the car ads. I don't hear anybody saying, oh my God, another ad for Chevrolet. No, we're all kind of used to all the car ads. Another Bud Light ad. Well, maybe I'm going down the wrong road there, but Bud Light, all the advertisements we see for Miller Lite, all these things, we're used to it. We're not used to it with sports books. The integrations into the broadcast, though, those are where I believe a lot of people start to feel that creep in a way that they're uncomfortable with. And a lot of it goes back to the fact that I don't think a lot of people really know how to do it in any sort of deft way.
You're right. It's the delivery of it, right? Like, I don't think it's crazy if, like, right before the game, if the announcer felt comfortable talking about, oh, and by the way, this is what we're looking at as far as like we had in the game tonight. And you like quickly hit what the spread is and the total is and you move on, right? Like it's not like you're not dragging it out. It doesn't have to be 90 seconds. It can literally be 10 seconds, right? It's just kind of like, hey, here's what the spread is. Here's what the total is. And anyway, blah, 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 blah. And you move on, like stuff like that. But it's most of the time it's the delivery that really gets to us. And Dustin, one of the other things I want to hit on, again, I know I went way off here, but the other thing real quick is just, we do have YouTube involved for the first time this year as well, right? Like now Sunday Ticket is over on YouTube TV. What is that going to look like? What are they going to, if anything? I mean, the question could be nothing. I mean, the answer could be nothing, but there is that as well, right? We do have a new player that is going to be a major player because trust me, I made the call to DirecTV yesterday to break up and it was awkward. It's like, what? We've been together for 15 years. What did we do? What can we do? And I'm like, I'm sorry. It's actually not me. It is you. You don't have what I need anymore. And so I'm leaving you. Like you don't have the only reason I had you anymore. So I am leaving you. So, but what YouTube TV does is even something that I'm interested in as we head into NFL as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Adam. Like, it's kind of continue to be slow and in the background. Again, like SVP makes it accessible, right? That's accessible. He's the model. He brings it to the masses or people who are casual bettors. Like that's what that's what I would like to see in broadcast and not be hammered over the head with live reads for what the in-game odds. Like I watch Phillies broadcast and like it feels so forced. It's like the announcers obviously don't know or don't care about it, but they're like, here are the odds at the start of the game. Here are the odds right now, and they have no idea what they're reading. It's like, the Phillies are now minus 10,000. Great. Like it's just right. It feels so worthless. And yeah, it's interesting. Because and with ESPN, obviously, when we're not right away, but when that integration starts happening and how much it happens is going to be interesting. And probably because they're not results oriented and on ESPN, it's going to be a little more muted, I would imagine, because they don't get paid based on how many people they send to ESPN bet. They're just getting paid no matter what. So, one last thing on advertising. Did everybody? Yeah. Am I the only one? I got my Bet.US NFL schedule in the mail.
You get it every year. Yeah.
Every year.
Yeah.
Like regular offshore sportsbook. I don't even know how I got on that mailing list, but I have been for like 20 years.
I have moved. I've moved states like since I signed up for a Bet.US account. Like I signed up for a Bet.US account when I was like 19 years old. I have moved 3 different states, 5 different houses where they find me every time. Same. I don't know how they do it. Same. Like I get it every single time. Adam, I know you recently moved. I don't know if they've tapped on your door yet or slid anything underneath. I mean, like they're going to find you though. They'll find you. They'll track you down.
I'm very glad that there are multiple security doors to get to my place.
Whatever. We'll get to it later.